New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. The topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu.
Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Emmy Vadnais, co-host with Jeffrey Mishlove. Our topic today is gaining power over thoughts and feelings with my guest, Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor, who is a Harvard-trained and published neuroanatomist whose research specialized in understanding how our brain creates our perception of reality. At the age of 37, she experienced a severe hemorrhage in the left hemisphere of her brain. From this rare form of a stroke, known as an AVM, she could not talk, walk, read or write, or recall any of her life. It took her 8 years to rebuild her brain to recover all physical, emotional, and thinking abilities. In 2008, Jill gave a presentation about her experience with her stroke at the TED conference in Monterey, California, which was the first TED Talk to ever go viral through the internet. She has been an active member of the National Alliance on Mental Illness and is a national spokesperson for the Harvard Brain Tissue Resource Center. Jill is author of My Stroke of Insight, A Brain Scientist's Personal Journey, and Whole Brain Living, The Anatomy of Choice and the 4 Characters That Drive Our Life. If you enjoy this program, please like, subscribe, press the bell icon, and share. Jill is joining us from Bloomington, Indiana. Now I'll switch over to the internet video. Welcome, Dr. Jill. It's a great pleasure to have you with me on New Thinking Aloud today.
I am so happy to be with you. I'm really looking forward to this.
You experienced a stroke when you were 37, and from that you lost the ability to read and write and even to have a personal history of yourself. You recounted that in your book, My Stroke of Insight, and you also had a fabulous TED Talk that was the first to go viral. You since have written a new book called Whole Brain Living because my understanding is that you felt a peaceful euphoria from that stroke and really went from maybe the left to the right brain, which we'll get into. And this next book, you want to let others know how they can experience that as well themselves without maybe having to experience a stroke per se.
Exactly. You know, we live in a time of so much strife and we have so much negativity coming at us. So a lot of, record levels of anxiety and depression are existing right now. It's like, how can people get to know and differentiate different parts of their own brain so that they can learn to practice their own compassion for self, their own self-nurturing, and find more peace?
Of course, there's practices such as mindfulness and meditation and, depending on a person's belief system, prayer and so forth, and other types of physical activities, maybe even taking a relaxing bath or a shower that can help people in this regard. What you did in your new book is you really broke down the different areas of the brain, of the different parts of ourselves. Can we get into a little bit about some of those characters and why that's so important for you to share this message with people?
So first of all, I'm a neuroanatomist. So I think in terms of brain, I think in terms of cells and which cells are communicating with which cells, with which chemicals and what quantities of those chemicals. And then what do those cellular circuits do for us? So our ability to speak, it's a group of cells. Our ability to move our body, it's a group of cells. Our ability to feel anxiety, it's a group of cells. Our ability to experience peace, deep inner peace, it's a group of cells. So when we better understand what is actually happening in the brain at a cellular level, then as we differentiate the different parts of our brain, then we can choose. We know what our options are to choose for choice. So instead of yes, meditation is a wonderful tool, but what's actually happening in the brain when we meditate is we are meditating consciously on something so that we can calm the language circuitry of the left hemisphere, the monkey mind that a lot of people call it, or the brain chatter, or whatever you're comfortable calling that. But as we meditate, we move ourselves away from that cellular circuitry. We calm that. And as that calms, other circuitry in the brain comes online and we become more mindful. We become more in the present. We become more aware that we can choose deep inner peace. So what I believe is that the better people better understand their brain and differentiate the different parts of their brain that we all have, then it's like, well, it's easier for me to succeed when I know where I'm going. And so whole brain living kind of sets that roadmap so that people can better understand, well, what does that mean? When I meditate, what's my goal? When I'm being mindful, what's my goal? Can I forget the mindfulness or the meditation part of it and just go there and practice that and learn that part of me so that I can embody it at any moment in an instant?
When you had your experienced a stroke, you describe in your books that you really lost the sense of an individual self and that you felt that you merged into the greater wholeness or oneness. Can you describe what that experience was like and how you came to this understanding of these different parts of the brain?
So we all have two hemispheres, the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. And each hemisphere has emotional limbic cells, which are alarm, alert, emergency, right here, right now, sympathetic nervous system. And then each of those two hemispheres has thinking tissue. And so what's the difference between the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere? When I experienced the hemorrhage that wiped out my left hemisphere emotional tissue and thinking tissue, what I lost was in that left hemisphere emotional tissue is a group of cells that has the power. How this works, it's just mind blowing. But what these cells do is they step out of the consciousness of the present moment. Imagine that. How on earth, have you ever stopped to think about how on earth can I take my consciousness and not be in the present moment? Because the present moment is what is here and what is real in the input we're getting. But we have these miraculous cells that step out of the present moment and they say, we're going to go and we're going to look at our past experience. And have we ever had this experience before? And if so, if it feels familiar, then I feel safe. But if it doesn't feel familiar, then I move into alarm, alert, push it away. So this is our ability to learn across time. So as a biological creature, to be able to have a consciousness that I can remember what shoes I put on this morning without looking, and I know why I put those particular shoes on. Well, this is from a biological phenomenon, a miracle. I mean, the way the human brain works is this miracle. So the left hemisphere has this record of our past, and so much so on that linearity, it can project into the future. And it's about me. I have a group of cells. We all have a group of cells in that left hemisphere that says, I am an individual. I am Jill Bolte Taylor. This is who I am. This is where I live. This is all the details about my life. This is what I like. This is what I don't like. This is what I think is good. This is what I think is bad. So that left brain defines me, the individual, and is designed to relate me to the external world. Because as a biological creature, I'm not just a biological creature, but I have a sociological relationship with other humans. The right hemisphere doesn't have me, the individual. That's all about the left hemisphere. And in the absence of that group of cells that has my identity, in the absence of that, all I have is the present moment. And in the present moment, then I have emotional tissue, information streaming in through my sensory systems, going to the emotional system, the two amygdala, one in each hemisphere. And the amygdala are asking the question, am I safe? The right hemisphere is saying, based on all the information that I currently have right here, right now, that's all. Am I safe? Well, the left amygdala is comparing it to my past experience and saying, am I safe? But the right hemisphere, in the absence of the inhibition of that left hemisphere that is dominant in our society, in the present moment is all we have. And in the absence of me, the individual, I become expansive and open, and it's to the possibilities of what is right here, right now. So in the right hemisphere, it's very entrepreneurial and very creative and very open and expansive. And it doesn't have the definition of what is right and what is wrong and what is good and what is bad. So all it has is this feeling of excitement and euphoria and present and the beauty of being in the present. So it's being in the flow. What does that feeling feel like for each of us? And so we end up with these two really separate levels of consciousness. One that surrounds the me, the I am this, that, and the other, and this is where I live, and this is what I like, and this is right and wrong, and blah, blah. And then the right hemisphere, which I'm not defined as me, the individual. Instead, I'm a part of the bigger picture of humanity, and I am in relationship with my brothers and sisters on this planet, in relationship to all that is, and in relationship with at that level of consciousness. So we end up with these two very diverse ways of being, and that's what meditation and mindfulness of how do we take control of what's going on in that left hemisphere so that we can quiet that, so that we can feel the peaceful nature of simply being in the present moment.
Mm-hmm. I know you've mentioned this quite a bit in other talks and presentations. Can you just give a little glimpse for those who might be new to you and your experience about what that was like for you when your left brain went essentially offline and had a brain bleed? Is that what happened? It was a hemorrhage.
Yeah. It was a major hemorrhage. So here I was. My area of specialty when I was at Harvard was in the Department of Psychiatry, and I was doing work. I cared about how does our brain create our perception of reality? How does it work? And it's like I really learned to be very careful what you ask the universe for. Because it was like, okay, little girl, you want to know how your brain creates your perception of reality? We're going to wipe out half of your brain so that you know what that does. And in the absence of that, you know what now you have. And the beauty of wiping out my left hemisphere was all my past, all the pain from my past was gone in 4 hours. And when I woke up later that afternoon, I literally spent 4 hours on the morning of the stroke watching my brain go offline circuit by circuit. So I had tunnel vision, and I'm asking myself, okay, this is kind of similar to a migraine. An amplification of sound, which meant I wasn't inhibiting my brain, my audio system wasn't processing audition sound in a normal way. Paralysis on the right side of my body, so it was like, okay, the motor cortex is gone offline. So I literally watched my brain shut down what was going on in that left hemisphere, circuit by circuit, to the point where on the afternoon of the stroke, I could not walk, talk, read, write, or recall any of my life. So I essentially became an infant in a woman's body, but I was not unconscious. I was still conscious with the cells that I had. And it's interesting because my peers, when you look at the definition of what is consciousness, in a human, it is that left thinking tissue. It is our rational mind. When we have the rational mind, then yes, we're being conscious, or we are a conscious being. And it was like, but in the absence of that left thinking tissue or the left emotional tissue, I was still conscious. I was still processing data, but I wasn't doing it in the same way that I had done it when I had both hemispheres working together. So because of this experience and having that left hemisphere shut down for essentially 8 years, and it took, I spent 8 years rebuilding after I had a major craniotomy where they removed the blood clot the size of a golf ball. And they said, go home and heal. It was like, you're on your own here. And so that's what I did. I used what I knew in my right hemisphere to rebuild the circuitry of my left hemisphere that I knew that I had lost, that I knew that I needed in order to be able to be a functional human again. And, you're trained as an occupational therapist. So, in our world, language is everything. If we cannot communicate, if we don't have a verbal form of communication, then we become on the wayside of life. And so it was my priority to regain the circuitry of language, and language is left hemisphere based. And it is so complex because it's sound, the creation of sound. Dog is a sound. And then another group of cells places comprehension, meaning on dog. And then there's spelling, and there's an alphabet, and then there's all of it. And I mean, it's amazing how complex language is. And so I had to rebuild each of those circuits, which your colleagues, the, speech and language folks were very helpful in pushing me, but mostly it was my mother, who was, she really took over my life and helped me rebuild my brain circuit by circuit.
Wow. What an inspiration you are for those listening who have experienced some type of brain injury in some form, which I know you're also a spokesperson for the National Alliance of Mental Illness. And essentially you went through a healing process. What was it in your background that helped you to regain your function? Although it sounds like you did have some therapists and a mother who deeply loved and supported you as well.
Yeah. Especially in the beginning. In the beginning, all I had was trauma. I had a major hemorrhage the size of a fist in my left hemisphere. So the left hemisphere cells were offline, but I was not dead. I did not die that day. And in the right hemisphere, if the value of the right hemisphere is the experience of the present moment, then I still was a wonder in my own mind. I couldn't speak. I couldn't understand when others spoke. I was half paralyzed, but it didn't matter. What mattered was I didn't die that day. I was still alive and I was being loved. And my mother she's a mathematician by training. I have a brother diagnosed with schizophrenia. And I was a brain scientist. So my mother knew a lot about the brain because we were best friends. And what did we talk about? We talked about the brain, all the time, all through my education, all through my graduate program, all through my work at Harvard in the Department of Neuroscience, all through my time at the Harvard Department of Psychiatry. So my mother believed at a fundamental level that the difference between me, who would have been diagnosed as normal prior to this, and my brother, who would be diagnosed with schizophrenia, that the difference between us was in the way our brain cells were wired. And so when my brain cells exploded essentially in the left hemisphere and they went offline, then some of those cells died and some of those cells simply moved into trauma, because when there's a blood bleed into the brain, blood is toxic, poisonous to cells. So those cells will either die or they will curl up in a little ball and kind of move into protection mode. So they rest dormant for us to reawaken once the trauma is removed. So in the grace of my mother just moved in, took over my life. She recognized I was now her infant. And, she just loved me, and loving me meant watching what did I need? And boy, did I need sleep. And if I needed to sleep, she let me sleep. And this was the biggest difference between my recovery and a typical recovery, is I was given the grace of sleep as long as I wasn't sleeping because I was depressed. Now, if I was depressed, but I wasn't depressed, I was so thrilled to be alive, I didn't die that day, right? And so I had all the excitement of the present moment. I was allowed to sleep. She would feed me, take me to the restroom. I'd go back to sleep. This was like the first couple of weeks. And then I started having a little more time up, and she would start teaching me. And we had no TV, we had no radio, we had no distracting noise because I had to be really focused, and then I'd get exhausted and go back to sleep. So in the beginning, it was just, being an infant again. But once I really started regaining abilities, I was aware of what I had lost. And what I had lost, it's kind of like I became autistic. Except the difference between me and a typical person with autism was I had known what normal was. And so somewhere in the figments of my mind, it was, what do I need to be able to do again in order to rebuild that foundation of a network so I could ultimately become a normally functioning human? And ultimately, for me, that was going to be language. And I'll tell you, I have so much respect for the human brain that is capable of reading. I mean, my mother would say, she'd draw like an S, and she'd say, Jill, this is an S, and it sounds like S. And I would look at her and I'd think, you've lost your mind. This is a squiggle, and it makes no sound. I mean, it's like, what are you talking about? And eventually she taught me how to look at the letters of the alphabet. And, is an S sideways the same as an S up and down or backwards? No, you have to memorize these things. But I didn't have a neuron to hang it on over there. So it was like so difficult for me to actually learn. And it was painful. It's like learning to play the piano when your hands don't want to do, and your brain is confused and you're reading in all this information, and it's like, it's hard, right? And so that's what it was like for me to rebuild that left hemisphere. But after 8 years, I regained those abilities and really became 100% functional on both hemispheres. And then the beauty of that is now I can clearly differentiate, well, what did I have? What was my characteristic profiles in the right hemisphere? And what characteristic profiles were I having to rebuild in order to be perceived again as normal?
Wow. Hats off to you and your mother and all the other people who loved and supported you, because it really sounds like a miraculous healing.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a great story. That's all I can say. I was perfectly set up for success based on my personal experience with my brother and then my academic training in order to have this experience and to be so disconnected from any normal reality, because I really did become an infant. But to know that, and to know that that's where the peace is. And for me, the motivation of coming back was that if people understood that we are wired for this peaceful, blissful euphoria right there in our own right hemisphere, and that it's the things that the left hemisphere is fueling, feeding itself. I mean, now's a perfect example of, we're in the years of the election. So all of this information is bombarding us, and sometimes we're okay with that bombardment, and sometimes our heart just feels so heavy. And it's like, okay, so how do I still listen to that so I stay informed? What part of my brain is doing that? But how do I stay out of my fear of the future or my fear just of my social group. Oh my gosh, you're on the other side, but I still want to love you anyway. And this is what we're all facing, and Thanksgiving's coming. And you know, the beauty of Thanksgiving when you get together with old family members is you instantly get reduced back down to where you were in the pecking order of being a sibling, right? We all become 5-year-olds again. So it's like, why is that? What part of the brain is doing that? And how do we view that differently so we understand a different point of view so that we can maintain our own integrity as we walk into potentially volatile situations and still maintain our own sensibility of peace?
It looks like you built on research. Is it Roger Sperry who did the split brain experiments, and didn't he sever the corpus callosum? And I think it was around seizures, but I think he showed how the right, like how you're describing it, the right brain has these certain characteristics and the left has these other characteristics. But what you've done is you've taken that further. And can we talk a little bit about these different characters? Because my understanding is that you suggest that we are feeling individuals and then we think, and that you suggest that on the left side of the brain, we have a thinking and a feeling center, and on the right side of the brain, we have a thinking and a feeling center. So could you share a little bit more about that, please?
Sure. When you think about, first of all, you're doing very well. Roger Sperry was a great surgeon who, because a group of his patients had epilepsy, he wanted to sever the corpus callosum, which is the highway of information transfer between the two hemispheres, so that the whole brain didn't have a seizure, because seizure activity can be quite violent and traumatic to the cells inside of the brain. So he wanted to be able to see if he could contain that epileptic seizure activity to just one hemisphere. So he cut the corpus callosum, and he was working with a psychologist, Gazzaniga, and Gazzaniga would give these personality tests essentially to the two different hemispheres, because they were different. They process information different ways, and they identified two very different characters between the two hemispheres. And one they thought was the rational thinking left hemisphere, and then the other was the right hemisphere, which didn't have language. And so Gazzaniga was not very kind to that part of our character, because it essentially was dumb. It didn't have language. If it didn't have language in our society, we kind of call it dumb. But that really overlooked what it actually did have. But anyway, so as I essentially take that a step further, because I'm a neuroanatomist. I think about the evolution of the human brain. And where are we? We are not a finished model. The brain is in continuing changing. And that's obvious when you look at our society. If we were really completely whole-brained, we would not be having all the wars we are. We would not be aggressive to one another. We would have a little more self-control. We would be, the whole thing would be working a little bit better. So, but here we are. And so we're existing in a left dominant society, which is about the me, the I. It's all about me. I care about me and mine, you and yours. Unless you look like me or sound like me or smell like me or eat like me or dress like me, then you're the other. And if you're the other, then I'm better than you, because the left hemisphere functions on a hierarchy. And so I'm better because I'm me, right? So that's what's going on in that left hemisphere. So as we look at the evolution of the mammalian nervous system, it looks like there are creatures on the planet that have just the level of our spinal cord with segmentation, some without segmentation. And then the next level is vertebrate with segmentation. And then new tissue gets added on top, and that's going to be at like the level of the medulla. So that's like now a little brain at the top of the spinal cord that's going to control what's going on below. And then all the kinks get worked out between all those groups of cells, and it streamlines. And then new tissue gets added on top. top, and then we have new kinds of species and creatures. And so we end up with a brainstem and the pons, and the pons has a group of cells that can respire air. So by the time you get to the level of sophistication of that level of a brainstem with the pons, now you have amphibious who can crawl in and out of water. They can breathe with lungs, with gills. And then they can live in the water, and then evolution happens and new tissue gets added on top. And the difference between a reptile, which has our brainstem level of sophistication, and the mammal is the addition of new tissue called the limbic tissue, or our emotional tissue. And it happens bilaterally. So we have emotion in the right hemisphere and emotion in the left hemisphere. And then in the case of the human, we end up with more tissue getting added on top in both sides. And that's our cerebral cortex for higher cognitive thinking. So we, as humans, we end up with two emotional groups of cells. And on top of that, we have two thinking cognitive groups of cells. And the way that the design works is that the new tissue added on top is designed to modify or regulate the tissue below. So it is an expansion of that tissue, but it's at a higher level of evolution, of being able to regulate and mature, essentially. So what we are doing as human beings is we are working out the kinks now between our lower emotional groups of cells in each hemisphere and our thinking tissue. Again, in that emotional is our alarm, alert in each hemisphere. But the two hemispheres, as I stated earlier, process the same information, but in different ways. So the right hemisphere is about the right here, right now experience of alarm, alert. And the left emotion is going to be alarm, alert based on my past experience. And then in there is going to be me, the individual, my ego. And then the left thinking tissue will be our rational thinking brain. And then the right tissue, thinking tissue, is going to be the experience of the expansive, open part of who I am in the present moment. So we all end up with, as humans, we end up with these 4 different characters, and I label them 1, 2, 3, 4. I give mine names. I don't name yours because I want you to give your own 4 characters names, because these are different parts of our identity that we can learn to know and to exhibit at any moment in time. So I call character 1 is the left thinking tissue. The left thinking tissue is the part of our brain that is our rational, organized self. This is the part of us that goes to work. This is the part of us that likes to categorize and organize. And my character 1 tissue comes out when I go to the office, when I'm doing business call, when I get myself online on time. Character 1 likes to control its environment because it's the way in which me, an organic individual, relates to the external world. And so it likes to control people, places, things. And one of the things is time. So my character 1 puts my glasses on. It puts my earrings in. It gets me on time. And we all have that part of ourselves. And I call mine Helen, Hell on Wheels. She gets it done. Have you named your character 1?
I've been thinking about it, and the best I can come up with right now is the CEO.
That's exactly right. That's what the CEO does.
Yeah.
And you can tune into your CEO in an instant. You know that part of who you are.
Yeah. Like organizing this interview and making sure that everything is running smoothly and on time, as you say, and that you're comfortable, I'm comfortable. I would say that that's the CEO.
Yeah. And she has her own clothing that she wears.
Yes.
Right?
I've got my little blazer on. Yes.
Yeah. She has her earrings. She has her jewelry. She has her spot. Right. So this is the part of us that organizes our world between me, the biological, and my external social norm. And it cares about the social norm because it wants to fit in or not.
Yeah.
Depends on that part of somebody's brain.
And we want to look and be professional so that people can understand what we're saying. Right. And respect and have credibility so that they would find value in it, hopefully.
That's exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that hierarchy. The character one functions on that hierarchy. So that's the left thinking tissue that we all have. The left emotional tissue, again, has me, the individual, and it has all of my past and it has my future. So it functions on the linear clock. And in that linearity of time is all my pain from the past. And so all my pain from the past, I have stored in that group of cells. And so if something happens in the present moment and it looks familiar, but it's dangerous, then I'm going to compare it to my past experience and say, that's not safe. And I'm going to push it away and I'm going to say no. And then I'm going to say it's bad and I'm going to judge it. And then, because here comes the right, wrong, good, bad. Right? The judgment of what is right, what is wrong, what is good, what is bad, and where are we on the hierarchy? And so I'm higher than that which is bad, or I'm lower. And so this is the part of us that is either arrogant because it sees itself as better, or it can be self-loathing or fearful because it's wounded. Now, this information, and this is why we go to therapy, right? So, I mean, therapists, offices are filled with our little character twos because this is our pain and we need to go and talk through it and think about it and reflect upon it and make sense of it and
give it attention, right?
Give it attention and let it heal. And that's the beauty of this little part of who we are. This is where we learn. This is where we grow. If we never go and reflect upon that which we find as something we need to push away from, then we don't learn our lessons, right? And so we keep running the same lesson over and over and over again, but we're caught in the pain of it instead of the lesson. So I always say character 2 is for lessons. It's not meant to be a lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
It's not meant to be a lifestyle. And I know people who use their character 2 as a lifestyle, and they worry all the time and they complain all the time and they moan all the time and they blame all the time and they're not very happy and we know that, right? And so, but that's little character 2. Now, you probably know your little character 2 well. I know my little character 2. I call her Abby. And my little Abby is not a very happy part of who I am, but she's an important part of who I am.
Yeah, and you call her Abby because of the separation and abandonment. And I also really like how you describe in your book about the separation even just from the womb, how that can create that sense of separation for all of us.
Right. Because before, when I was with mom and when I was in the womb, her blood is my blood. Her liquids are my liquids. If she's smoking, I'm gasping for oxygen. I mean, we're one. I'm part of this beautiful whole. And, the rhythm of her heartbeat is my music track. Right. And as soon as I'm taken out of the womb into the real world, first of all, the lights, the physical stimulation, the shock of no longer breathing, running on her liquid system, but now, the expansive of the lung. I mean, birth is this enormous experience for all of us. So, and that to me is kind of the birth of this little part of who we are in separation and pain. And now because I know that circuitry, if something happens in the external world and I don't feel safe, then it just goes straight to that circuitry. But again, it's meant to be a lesson. It's not meant to be a lifestyle. So, but that's what's going on in the left hemisphere.
Would you also say that is like the ego?
The ego is definitely in that left brain because that's in the separation of me from all other and the identification of me as a complete individual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because prior to that, I'm not. I'm just this collective of cells. I'm in the womb. I'm developing at a rate of 250,000 cells per second. I mean, so what I become is the consciousness of the energy around me, and I'm a part of the energy ball of mother.
So just to recap, the character 1 is the thinking part of the left side of the brain, and character 2 is the emotional part of the left side of the brain. You're suggesting that we need both and all of these, but we want to become more aware of that we're not necessarily living in one area. And this is the part of you that went offline during your stroke.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So the right hemisphere is right here, right now. And it doesn't have me, the individual, and it doesn't have linearity of time. So emotionally, what it does is information streams in through our sensory systems, through our eyes, through everything, and it goes into the limbic system first. So because information gets processed in the limbic system, we are feeling creatures who then think, instead of thinking creatures who then feel. So it's so important that we learn and we listen to what's going on emotionally, or isn't it? So that we can think about it, we can process it, but to squash down our emotions gets us in real trouble, because it's like plugging a pipe. And I can push my emotions down and clog that pipe, but eventually that pipe's going to blow or break. And so that's why it's so important that we do both.
Yeah. And I think Lolly, your dog in your lap right now, is a really beautiful example of being emotional, having emotions, because so many people love animals, and dogs really often provide that unconditional love and emotional support to us humans who can get really stuck in our left hemisphere.
Exactly. Because dogs are right here, right now. You know, they're right here, right now. Do they have a linearity across time? I think that those of us who have pets know that, yes, they can hold a grudge. But that's the left brain. You have to have a left brain to be able to tap in the past and say, I'm mad at you and I'm not going to forgive you yet.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And, you know, dogs, if you've ever left your dog somewhere they didn't want to be left and then went back to get them, they can, like, you know, they can hold it against you for a few hours. So.
Yeah. And my dog, when I take her for a walk, she knows her way home.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And in order to do that, she has to have that path registered somehow in her brain from the past.
Yeah. So we have Helen and Abby in the left side. Now can we move to the right? The characters 3 and 4?
Yeah. So character 3 is the emotional tissue of the right hemisphere. And I have that as number 3, because if you take a brain and you open it up, then I go left thinking, left emotion, right thinking. So number 3 is going to be the right emotional tissue. And so this is going to be the experience of the present moment. When I dive into water, what does that feel like? It feels the temperature of the water. It feels pressure against my body. It feels wet. What does wet feel like? Well, I don't have wet in the past or in the future. I have wet in the present. And so right here, right now, and there's this, young, when we think about our young selves, our little parts, the youth of who we are, the thing about the cells of our limbic system is they never mature. And because they don't have that, we have thinking tissue that is our mature selves. So we end up with these 2 little selves inside of ourselves, my little unhappy self, and then my little I'm in the present moment self. And my little in the present moment self, it wants to go do stuff. And it wants to go into the woods, and it wants to get in the mud, and it wants to play in the mud puddles, and it wants to swim, and it wants to play basketball, and it wants to do art, and it wants to be creative, because in the right hemisphere, there's no right and no wrong, no good, bad, no judgment. So it's like, yeah, give me something and I'm going to make a mess, or I'm going to color something. And to the right hemisphere, the leaves don't have to be green. Where to the left hemisphere, it's about what is right, what is wrong, what is proper. So the right hemisphere ends up as our little creative self. And in that creativity, we become very entrepreneurial. We become it's social. It's not about me, the individual. It's about us as humanity. So it's like, yeah, when I go play, I like to call my pals, and it's like, let's go get our little character 3s together and go play. And it doesn't matter what we're doing. Let's play with crafts, or let's do stained glass, or let's do a sport. Let's do whatever we want to do in the present moment. So it's very productive. It's very experiential. And so I call mine Pigpen because making a mess, chaos is the first stage of the creative process. And there's just no judgment there. So that's my little playful self. And we all have this little playful self, unless while we were growing up, perhaps one of our parents said, every time you go do crafts, that's a waste of time. Or every time you go do a sport, that's a waste of time. You ought to be more like character 1 or character 2, not using that language, but implying that that's what's right. And so some of us have had our little character 3 beaten out of us, essentially, because somebody in our environment didn't value that.
Yeah. Or in our society, a lot of people want to be in that state, right? In the flow, being in the present moment, playing, having a good time, but we have responsibilities and we can have even shame sometimes around the conditioning of be productive and so forth.
Right. Yeah. But if we allow ourselves to have this part of who we are, it's a really healthy part of who we are. Because, as biological creatures, we are not machines. You don't plug us in and leave it running, and then it runs and runs and runs and runs and runs, and then it dies, and then we go and buy a new one. We are not like that. As biological creatures, we have cycles. We have a push, which while we're awake, we're bringing in stimulation and we're having an experience or a process in the world. And then we have a pause. We go to sleep. And we go to sleep because that's when all the garbage cleaners come out and clean up all the waste from all those cells in our body that have been so busy processing literally billions, trillions of bits of data moment by moment by moment in order for us to exist with a perception of reality as an engaging biological human. So we have this biological push and pause. And I think everybody's probably had the experience of, I go to bed at night and I've got a problem that I'm trying to figure out and I'm contemplating it. And then I go to sleep and then I wake up in the morning and I have an answer. How does that happen? That happens because we allow the push to pause. And in the pause is where our real power is. But unfortunately, we also exist in a society that doesn't value sleep. And in our ego state of being, it's like, oh yeah, well, I function on 4 hours of sleep a night. And it's like, yeah, but imagine how much more interesting you might be if you actually took that next cycle, so it's not just about I can function. It's about, can I be creative? Can I be so much more than just this, robot, essentially? So that's character 3. And that's, it's important to know that part of who we are because that's essentially the reset button.
My background in rehab medicine and therapy, prevention recovery really does take pause around how much sleep benefited you with your healing. And what you just described with what happens in the brain really makes sense because all too often when people have any kind of injury, including a neurological one in the hospitals and the rehab centers, is that it's so much on a schedule that people rarely get that time to rest and restore.
Right. Yeah. My mother took me home out of the hospital as soon as possible. And she essentially closed the door. She was my gate guard. She wouldn't even let my boss in to see me because she came once and my mother noticed that I used all this energy, even though I couldn't walk or talk or read or write, but I still wanted to show her I was okay, which I wasn't, but I used all this energy. And my mom said I was just exhausted when she left. And she said, that's your last visitor. And we're in a society where we want to go and visit people who are in the hospital or who are not well, so to be supportive. But instead of sitting there for an hour and talking at somebody or being busy with somebody, sometimes it's just best to go in for a 5-minute visit and take their hand and stroke their hand and touch their face appropriately and say, I got you. I believe in you. I know you're going to be okay. I'm going to give you all my positive juju, and really fuel the person. And because, when visitors came, they either brought me energy or they took energy away from me. And it was like, I really needed people to bring me their love, bring me their support, and then leave and not drain me, because I am not capable of having an intense conversation. So, but it was really important to me that I be loved. Yeah, so there are different ways that we can actually, in a healthy way, support one another in our healing.
My understanding is you gave a plaque or a sign to Oprah Winfrey that said, please be responsible for the energy you bring into this space.
Exactly. Yeah, that was because people either brought me energy or they took energy away. And so it's so important that as you go and you visit, really have any relationship with anyone, please take responsibility for the energy you bring into any space. And when you pay attention to that, then you start looking at the energy that other people bring, and you really see this dynamic of who's giving energy, who's taking energy, who's essentially fueling the space, and who's actually violating the space.
And by a person understanding these 4 characters, and I want to get to your acronym BRAIN that can help people further, they can understand their energy more.
Yeah, because essentially character 4 is going to be that right thinking part of our brain. And so it's in the present moment. It's not about the experience of doing or being. It simply is the awareness, consciousness that, oh my gosh, I'm alive. I'm alive. And I am made up of these magnificent cells that are so beautifully differentiated that 50 trillion of them, there's only like 8 billion people on the planet. I mean, that's like nothing compared to the number of cells making up our body that work together in perfect harmony for me to be a human in relationship to this life that I have. And that consciousness of the right hemisphere is like a portal beyond the social world, my relationship to my pain from the past, the experience even of my life, into simply gratitude that I exist at all. And so when you see dolphin, I don't know what it's like for you, but when I see dolphin, my whole soul just kind of wants to go with them. There's something about a rainbow. You know, why is it that we love the concept of a unicorn or of little fairies? I mean, what's that about? It lifts us into this character 4 part of who we are. And it's beautiful. And there's this sense of gratitude and inner peace. And it's like, isn't that the goal of what we're looking for when we're in our character 1, rational brain, blah, 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 or we're in our character 2, pain from the past, and we say, okay, we're going to have meditation, and we're going to preoccupy our brain and stop thinking the thoughts, or we're going to do a mantra where we essentially jump on that circuit and say, okay, we're going to cycle what we're going to say round and around so that it's not busy, busy, busy with all these other distractions. It's just the mantra. Or we're going to recite a prayer that allows us to settle ourselves into a state of peace. Because ultimately, as the left hemisphere becomes more quiet, then the right hemisphere becomes more expansive, because we're inhibiting the left hemisphere, which is removing its inhibition off the cells in the right hemisphere so we can dominate in the experience of that right hemisphere. So that means we have these 4 groups of cells, and it's like, do we have the power to choose which one of these characters I want to be at any moment? And yes, when we know our 4 characters and we strengthen all 4 of them, then we can have what you alluded to was the brain huddle, which is a conversation between these 4 parts of who we are so that we never experience conflict, because all 4 parts of us are essentially a democracy inside of my own head, and we get to vote on who and how we want to be in the next moments. So we end up with all this power over who and how we want to be. And to me, that's true freedom.
Yeah. What is the brain huddle?
So the brain huddle is BRAIN. It's an acronym. And B stands for breath. Well, why breath? Why do all of these modalities call for breath? Breath happens in the present moment. So as soon as I focus on my breath, I literally bring my mind to the present moment. It's a tool. So I focus on my breath. I can increase its amplitude. I can increase its frequency. I can hold my breath. We're the only animals that we can train to hold our breath. So go to your breath. B stands for breath. R stands for recognize which of the 4 characters called for this brain huddle. And I encourage people to get to know each of your 4 characters and then practice each of them calling the huddle. So let's say character 1, organized, structured, my CEO. And she says, okay, we're going to have a huddle. And we're going to have a huddle on the hour, every hour, of course, because that's what the CEO would do, right? And we're going to use our watch and we're going to have it ping. And every time it pings on the hour, we're going to have a huddle and find out, okay, well, am I being artistic and creative? Am I in my character 3 in that moment? Or am I in my pain? Am I not very happy? Or am I feeling rage? Or am I whatever I am? Am I in my 2? Am I in my 1? Or am I like in my blissful euphoria? And I'm just going to kind of chart it because that's what character 1 would do, right? So we practice being a character 1 calling the huddle. Character 2 doesn't want to call the huddle. Let's be really clear. So we're going to skip that for a minute. Character 3, let's say we're out being playful and we're like covered in mud or covered in stone dust or covered in whatever we're doing as our character 3. And it's like, okay, let's have a huddle. Okay, recognize that it was character 3 who had the huddle. Or let's say I'm just in a prayerful state. I'm feeling my bliss. I'm just so filled with gratitude. I'm in awe of life and that I have all this capacity and we all do. And I'm in my character 4. So B, bring your mind to the present moment. Watch your breath. R, recognize which of the 4 characters called the huddle. And why did I skip number 2? Because character 2 does not want to give up its unhappiness. It is so powerful. It is so delicious. Everybody else, they don't mind. They'll take a break and they'll switch on and off. But little character 2 wants to be heard. And it runs in these cycles and these circuits, but it's very specific cells. But what you need to know about the cells of all the brain is that a typical emotional loop, only takes 90 seconds. So from the moment I think the thought, let's say every time I think of you, I get mad because you said something mean about me at some point, right? Just easy example. So every time I think of you, literally for the next 20 years, I run this loop of less than 90 seconds where now I'm still mad at you, but it only lasts for 90 seconds, right? But we all know we can stay mad for longer than 90 seconds. And that's because we keep thinking the thought that keeps stimulating the emotional loop. And we keep running that loop and we can stay mad for decades. So little character 2 rarely wants to give up its pain. So the goal is to know all 4 of these characters so that at any moment, as soon as I feel my character 2 coming on, it's like, sweetie, not now. And I'm going to step into my character 1 I know well, my character 3 I know well, my character 4 I know well, and I'm going to self-soothe and nurture that little character 2. So R is recognize who calls the huddle. A is appreciate the fact we have 4 of us in here at all times. So that we got a team, right? Character 2 has a backfield of 3 really healthy parts of who we are. A, appreciate we have 4. I, inquire.
When I was reading your book, I had just had a little disagreement with somebody and I was noticing that my character 2 was active. And when I got to your acronym of appreciate, now certainly I practice mindfulness and self-compassion and acceptance. I think it was the first time that I appreciated my character 2 and it softened. And I've never done that before and it was really helpful.
Oh, they're all important. Little character 2 just needs to be loved. It's our alarm. Something's not right and we need to take a look at it. But if we just get caught in the pain, then we don't get out of it to evaluate and help it heal.
Well, it's so often that I think that we feel that part of ourselves, or many people can feel that part of themselves is bad or wrong. And that's where we store that shame. Right. Or even having the feelings, or I shouldn't feel that way. And so we put layers to it. And so I just noticed that it wasn't necessarily appreciating any acting out or any negative behavior, but it was appreciating, like you indicated in your book, that these emotions inform us and help us understand, kind of the light and the dark of things, and to help us with our learning and being able to be present with ourselves and others.
It's the only way we can heal. We have to have what hurts in order to be able to heal what hurts. But it doesn't heal itself. The other parts of our brain step in to hold the space. Character 1 wants to fix the problem. Character 3 wants to go and play and make it better. And character 4 is self-nurturing love. So when we know these different parts of ourselves, then we can, it's like a hand. When we know we have fingers, then we can have higher levels of dexterity instead of just using the hand to push things around. And most of us just think of our brain as one big sloppy soup. And what happens when it happens, and I don't have any control over any of it. It just is what it is. But that's not the case. We have very specific groups of cells that have very specific skills and do very specific things. So as a whole, now we become really at a higher level of our own evolution, because essentially we are self-evolving at this point.
Okay. And so then we have 2 more.
Yeah. So B is breath, present moment. R, recognize who called the brain huddle. A, appreciate regardless of who called the huddle. There's 4 of us. We're a team. I is inquire between these 4 of us. Which one of us do we want to be next? And then N stands for navigate, because life is a collection of moments. It's not just, I'm going to do this and I'm going to be that and I'm going to be that, because that's not how life is, right? Interference happens. So I might choose to be on a podcast with you as a character 1, but my dogs might bark at the squirrels and, all of a sudden we're not doing character 1 anymore, right? It's like everybody's character 3 and we got to go, go do that.
We moved to character 3 and 4 because of your dog Lolly.
Oh, exactly. So it's the navigation and the willingness. This is where, flexibility, resilience comes from, is knowing that I'm all of this. I don't have to be just the box with all the answers. I don't have to be always happy and always correct. I don't have to be anything. I am a living mess, but my mess can be differentiated so that I have some say in who and how I want to be in the long run.
So, Jill, where does consciousness reside? Because I know you're a neuroanatomist and the brain is, and I love that you love the brain so much. You're helping all of us so much. Where does the consciousness that we all have reside? Is it in our brain, outside of the brain, in all of our cells? Who is doing the switching of this focus and attention to these different characters?
I think that character 4, I think that we are a character 4. I think we are blissful euphoria. I truly believe that. Because when we're in the womb, just think about how development happens. If we begin as an egg that has been hanging out in our mother's ovary since our mother was 5 weeks old, that's a long time. So during the 5th week of my mother's gestation, she's smaller than a pea, in my grandmother's womb, one of those cells differentiate into her progenitor cells of the ovary. And that's the little egg cells. So I was hanging out in my grandmother's womb while my mother was 5 weeks old. So I witnessed my mother's entire 9-month gestation, except for that 5 weeks. I witnessed as an egg cell my mother's birth. I witnessed her life up through puberty. I witnessed her life up until I was the next egg cell that got ejected from my follicle into her womb, and my father was there for me. None of us can say our fathers were not there for us. Our father was there for us. And then with that egg sperm combination, magic began to happen in the duplication of the DNA. So the DNA, half mom, half dad, gets multiplied, and then the cells break apart. And so whole new cells packaging happens at a rate of literally 250,000 cells per second. Now, so where's the consciousness, right? I'm an energy ball. It's the consciousness of the DNA of my mother's body, of the composition of what I am evolving as this collection of cells, because they're all connected, because in the beginning, they're all identical. And in the beginning, they're essentially identical to mom before pop comes in, right? So the consciousness of the fetus ends up being this energy ball. So does the energy ball have the consciousness, right? Well, it would, but it's going to be different than the consciousness of my left character one, right? But as I evolve and then I get spit out into the world, I'm essentially an energy ball. I don't differentiate myself even as separate from mom. And then I go through this transformation of breath and life and light and stimulation and all that. Oh my God. And so that is now a conscious development, because as a biological, we adapt to our environment. So a part of my cells say, hey, hey, hey. So little character 2 gets born. Little character 3 is having this experience of the present. And those are the cells are in position and kind of organized, because they're the cells that are going to make me scream when I'm not happy and I'm hungry, so that I'm communicating, hey, I need food. Somebody pay attention to me. Or you poke and prod me and I'm going to scream because in the present moment, I'm not happy about being poked because I don't know what that is, right? And so the characters 2 and 3 come online. And then over time, even though the cells are in position, and the cells of the cerebral cortex are 6 layers thick. So it's very complex, and groups of cells maybe on layer 3 might communicate with this group of cells on layer 5. And then they get communicated with layer 5 over there, and that's going to inhibit those. And I mean, the cognitive circuitry is very complex, and we learn. And then there's this big separation between the present moment experience and the learning experience of the left hemisphere. And so all these different cells have consciousness. I mean, they're all living creatures. So when you say, where is the awareness? I believe we are character 4, consciousness. And then character 2 and 3 come online. And then character 1 comes online. And then all of the consciousness of characters 1, 2, and 3 are in the way, interfere with the experience of the character 4, which is simply present and aware and filled with gratitude and love. So I think we have all these consciousnesses, and then we have the body consciousness, because there's no question that the cells of the rest of the body are also having relationships with the cells around them. Everybody's social inside of this magnificent, world of 50 trillion living beings trying to make it all work.
Yeah. And we have a heart and feelings in our gut, and there's, the nervous tissue throughout the body. Would you say that the left hemisphere really shows the individual self, and that the right hemisphere shows that connection to the greater, the all? Because when you had your stroke, didn't you share that you felt a connection really to the whole universe?
Yeah, because in the absence of me, the individual of that left hemisphere, ego center, tiny group of cells, literally about the size of a peanut. I mean, so many of us, our whole identity is, oh, I am so important, and it's all about me. And it's like, really, that's a group of cells literally about the size of a peanut. And you wipe those out and you don't exist anymore, but you're still a conscious being with skill sets. I mean, it's fascinating. It's like our motor cells that allow us to have movement in our body is so much bigger than that tiny little group of cells that says, I am Jill Bolte Taylor. This is where I live. This is my phone number. These are the names of my dogs. These are my likes and my dislikes. A tiny little group of cells in that left hemisphere.
Since we know that so many people deal with stress, and you and I experience stress, we're certainly not immune to that. We have our character 2. For those listening who have experienced trauma, either with a little t or a big T, and maybe even have post-traumatic stress disorder, or even function in kind of a low-grade dis-ease because of, XYZ, their own experiences growing up or what they experience with family, or have a hard time in relationships or work or society or health or whatever they're going through. What are the ways, or what suggestion do you have to help people who might be kind of stuck in a loop with some of those character 2 issues, shall we say?
I think that, first of all, recognizing that character 2 is a gift. It's a gift. I may be caught in my pain, but my pain is a gift. It's not something I want to get away from. It's something I want to understand. But my character 2 will never be able to understand its own pain. It cannot. So if my character 2 is willing to recognize that I have a character 1, and I can spend some time in that part of who I am, I can practice organizing and categorizing. I can go and I can look at my drawers. And a character 2 probably has very messy drawers. And my character 1 wants to organize and create some order in my drawers. So if I say to myself, okay, I want to get to know my character 1, so I'm willing to go to this drawer, and I'm willing to create some order. While we are creating order, we are distracted away from our pain. I need to pay attention to that. Oh, I can do these things, engage in these activities, or I can step into my character 3 and I can go to an art space and I can play with clay and get my hands dirty, and I can engage my body in something, and I can realize that when I am out being really creative and I get lost in the flow of time, my little character 2 hasn't gone anywhere. It's still right there. My pain is still right there, but I don't have to live and breathe my pain all the time. I can step into these different consciousnesses. I can experience a sense of gratitude. What does it feel like every time I see a rainbow? My whole soul, I don't know why, my whole soul goes, oh my gosh, it's a rainbow. And then I start saying, look, it's a rainbow. Look, it's a rainbow. And everybody wants to look at the rainbow, right? And everybody's like, oh my God, we had a rainbow. And do you remember that rainbow? And it's like, oh wow, a rainbow. Or the dolphin, they're just these things that are wonder filled, right? Well, when I'm in my wonder, I'm not running that loop of my pain. So as I get used to the other parts of me, it's just setting it aside for a moment and saying, oh, I do have wonder. And then it's like, well, how does my wonder part of who I am, how can that relate to the part of me that is my pain? And it's going to do it in a very self-soothing, loving way, because that's what it is. It's who it is. And character 1 wants to come in and say, every time you two are together, every time we are with that person, we always feel horrible when we leave. So character 1's going to come in and say, so I'm going to set your schedule so we're going to minimize the amount of time we put you in that trauma so that you don't have to have that experience. So character 1's going to try to fix the schedule, and character 3 is going to want to, let's go play. Let's lift ourselves. Our pain is never far away. But it's the willingness of our little pain, little character 2, to be nurtured and loved by the rest of who we are. And the only way to be able to do that is to recognize that, yes, I do have these parts of who I am.
And to recognize that all parts of us matter.
They all matter.
Yeah. And I love the piece around the love. The love piece seems really, really important. And maybe that's part of our next level in our evolution of our brain tissue. Exactly. Is maybe more of that or something.
Take responsibility for the energy you bring into this space. What that really means is hook into, I might be in my pain and I will bring my pain to certain people, but I don't bring my pain and just spew it. And we're actually at a time in our society where it's as though we have been given permission to our little character 2s to show up in social circumstances where we weren't doing that before. We were more character one, appropriate and proper. So it's interesting as we get to know, and I think this is really fundamental. If there's 4 characters inside of me and there's 4 characters inside of everyone, that means there are 8 of us in every relationship. And so let's say you and I, let's say our character ones do really well together and we work together well. And maybe when you move into your character 2, I can step into my character 4 and I can hold that space. But let's say that I'm in relationship with someone who, if I move into my character 2, they can't hold my character 2. They move into their character 2 because of these beautiful mirror neurons, right? And you're going to tit for tat me. And it's like 2 character 2s will never find a resolution. Someone has to be willing to step out of their painful part into another part of who they are in order to hold the space until that 90-second rule can loop through. And then that person can make the decision, no, I'm going to stay in my 2 because I am really mad at you. But my character 1 might say, okay, but for me, I'm going to go over here and take myself out of the situation and create a healthy boundary.
We all have choice.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to share today about gaining power over thoughts and emotions or whole brain living?
I think that we covered a lot of material. But for me, it really boils down to better differentiating, getting to know who are we? Who are we? And as we spoke through this hour, each of us will probably recognize each of those 4 characters. And little character 2 tends to just kind of want to run wild and spew its venom. But just to remember, it's pain. It's just pain packaged in a sophisticated filter of emotion. And so when someone else is lashing out at us, we don't have to get caught in that dance. And if we have relationships where it seems like we inevitably are going to fight with one another, and like, family stuff, Thanksgiving dinner, bringing together the family, I instantly become my little sister self. If that relationship, if I bring my character 2 to that and my other siblings bring their character 2s, it's ugly. We all know what that's like. But if I know I have a character 2, then and you come at me now as my sister and you are like poking the bear because you know how to do it because we've been doing it for decades, right? Nobody knows like how to poke a bear better than a sibling. But if I don't respond to that and I just look at you and think, that's your little character 2. And your little character 2 is trying to get attention, even if it's negative attention. And it's like, I'm going to go into the kitchen and I'm going to help mom make that pie. As soon as one of us changes the dance has changed.
Yeah.
We have so much more power over what's going on, not just inside of ourselves, but in our relationships than we've ever really been taught.
Very beautiful. Thank you so much, Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor. It is a true honor and privilege to speak with you today. Thank you so much for all that you've shared and for being with me today.
Thank you, Emmy. It's been great.
And for those of you watching or listening, thank you for being with us because you are the reason that we are here.
This is Lolly.
Hi, Lolly. Oh, hello, baby. How are you?
She's the best dog.
Oh,
she's just,
what a sweetie. Is she a particular breed or a blend or?
I got her as a rescue and she was all but dead, but I think she's a schnoodle, a cross between a poodle and a schnauzer.
Yeah, she's beautiful.
She is so smart. I mean, she is so smart.
She's so happy to be with you.
She's loved. I mean, it was when we first met, she just leaned into me and pushed against me. And it was like, I'm yours, you're mine.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Book 3 in the new Thinking Aloud dialogue series is
UFOs and UAP, Are We Really Alone? Now available on Amazon.
You can now download a free PDF copy of issue 7 of the New Thinking Aloud magazine or order a beautiful printed copy.